Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Paulicki. He's Jacob Liberta. We're a Minnesota sports podcast. So if you're a Minnesota sports fan, especially a Minnesota Twins fan, season's about to get rolling here. Please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And we're going to be giving you a Minnesota Twins 2022 season preview. Just basically going over the roster, what we're expecting out of these guys, maybe some exciting prospects we got on deck. And then maybe give a record prediction at the end here and see where this team's maybe going. So let's just jump right into it, Liberta, head first. Tell me a little bit about this roster and just go around the diamond, who's going to be playing where. And I guess, how do you feel about this lineup compared to, say, a couple of years ago when the Twins were, at their peak?
I don't think it's quite as strong. I mean, from the onset, like coming into the season, I would say it is, just because I think the expectations were kind of there for that team a few years ago when we set all those records as far as power hitting goes. But it didn't have a ton of hype going into it. Like, it was good, but not great. And that's where I kind of feel like we're at now. But I would say this team has bats all over the place. I mean, the outfield, I feel really good about it, from Kepler out and right, especially with that center field flexibility to, like, if Buxton, let's say he goes down, I know that's happened a time or two in the past, but then you got Buxton, the star, out in center. I mean, this guy can be an MVP if he's playing all year long, and that's always been the story. And you got Kirilloff playing out in left, at least for now. Who knows? He could end up making a transition to first base, depending on Sano's success over there, and which would mean Larnach could be on the horizon, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we got Polanco at second base and Correa at short. I think this forms one of the best middle infields in the league that I don't think people are recognizing quite enough, because Polanco's coming off a career year where he hit north of 270 and he had over 30 home runs, and that's pretty incredible for a middle infielder, especially of his size. So I think that's an underrated, really, idea of this team. And Correa, obviously, we've talked about this before, but that's the marquee signing. I mean, we're paying him more this year than teams like the Orioles and Athletics are paying their whole lineups. So I mean, that says something. And he's also another MVP candidate. And you go Gio Urshela at third base. I think he'll be a very solid contributor. I don't think he's going to flash that much, but he's not going to be like a liability either. So I think he'll be just what we need. Then behind the plate, I'm curious to see how that shakes out and how much distribution there really is between Jeffers and Gary Sanchez. I think Jeffers, as long as he has a decent bat that hopefully can get, I would even say, north of 220 as far as batting average goes, then he'll probably get the majority of the starts. But if he doesn't, then you could see a lot more Sanchez, who definitely is a defensive liability, but he's certainly got a great power bat. And he's, I think, the quickest in MLB history to 100 home runs before. So, I mean, that says something. So I guess that's what I would look at. And then I guess factoring in the bench too, you got a guy like Arise and you got Nick Gordon, both utility players that'll probably see a lot of action, especially as injuries come up. And for instance, Arise, you could even see him as like an unconventional DH. But that's probably what I would lean in favor of. But you never know. I'm not sure how Rocco's going to really distribute that this season. I know it's been Nelson Cruz for the longest time until the second half of last year, and now it looks a lot different. So who knows what he's thinking. But yeah, those are kind of position players that everybody should keep in mind. But I don't know, what kind of sticks out to you, Bailey?
Yeah, like you mentioned, the middle infield I'm super excited about, because Polanco, I mean, Buxton is our best player, but Polanco has been the best player just based on availability the last couple of years. So I'm excited to have him and Correa up the middle. Polanco's definitely better at second than he was at short.
Totally.
So that's nice to have those two there. And then obviously behind them, you got Byron Buxton, who's just a superstar. He's had an amazing spring training. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to him staying healthy, because I really believe if he stays healthy and plays 120, 130 plus games, this dude could win MVP this year. So, his potential's off the charts, and it sucks we're still talking about potential with him, because we've seen it. We've seen the results. It's just, can we get a full season out of him? So, Sano, I've been a big Sano guy in the past, but I think, time's running out on him. He's not the best defensive player, obviously. He's just a super streaky hitter, and I think having him and Gary Sanchez in the same lineup some days is going to be very frustrating for Twins fans, because you're getting pretty much the same hitter out of both of those guys. So that'll be interesting. Alex Kirilloff intrigues me more so as a first baseman than a left fielder. Last year I wasn't super impressed with his play in the outfield, but if he has to play out there for a little while, it's not the end of the world. So he's a very intriguing younger guy. Sort of a prospect, but not really anymore. And our catcher situation doesn't blow me away by any means. Jeffers, I think, is solid. It sucks we had to trade Garver, but after all the moves we made since then, it kind of makes sense, why we ended up doing that. So Jeffers and Gary Sanchez, I'm not enamored with either of them, but hopefully we just get some decent play. And Urshela, yeah, I think he'll be a solid third baseman. But we're going to be talking about prospects here in a sec. But I think he might just hold the position down for a year or two or something like that until somebody else, like maybe a Jose Miranda, is ready to pop up. But
yes,
we don't need to dig too deep into like the pitching if you don't want to. But just very quickly, let me know your thoughts about the starting rotation and the bullpen as well.
Yeah, I'd say this is where the problems of this team really lie. I think the lineup will be just fine. Like they'll find ways to produce enough runs for us to win a lot of games potentially. But it comes down to this pitching staff, and it starts with the rotation because I feel really good about Joe Ryan, albeit he has a very small sample size. So who really knows? Like, let's hope that wasn't a fluke last year in his 6 starts he made or whatever it was, and put forth a lot of good performances. But again, we got to see it over a whole season's worth of games. And then Sonny Gray, I think it's a very reliable veteran pitcher that we now have on the staff that really can be a top of the rotation guy. So I'm pretty excited about him. He was lights out in his major league debut for the Twins in spring training. So I'm excited about him. I don't think there's any concern there. And then after that, that's really where you start to seriously worry because there's like Bailey Ober. I know he made 20 starts last year. He was all right. Like he was a slightly above average starting pitcher compared to everybody else around the league that met the qualifications as far as innings goes. Yep. So I'm fine with him. But again, that's not like some surefire thing. And then you go Chris Archer, another guy that's been banged up the last couple of years. He has been very good at points in his career, but that was starting to be a while ago now. So who knows what he's got left? I know he was touching 95 with his fastball in spring training though, which is encouraging. I think that's the biggest thing to look forward with him. But again, that's certainly no sure thing. And then you got Dylan Bundy. I think Dylan Bundy's gonna be bad, but that's just personal opinion. I think this is gonna be one of those guys who could be a potential DFA candidate, but I'll leave it at that. It just doesn't impress me. And then our bullpen, I would say I feel really good about the top of it. I know the deeper you get, the worse it's going to get. And that's anybody's bullpen, but especially this one. Like, there's going to be some guys who roll out there that I'm really questioning. But as long as we got Rogers, hopefully he's pitching all right. And then Duffy, I think, is a very solid reliever. Yeah. And now we got Johan Duran. Like, I think he's going to be a huge addition to this bullpen. They'll be able to throw in a lot of high leverage situations because he's just got gas with his fastball and just a really good mix. And then you got Alcala, who I still have hope for. I know he's kind of been shaky his whole career, but he's had points where he can pitch pretty well and effectively and really blow people away with another high velocity thrower. So I think there's certainly some hope there, but I think there's a lot of work to be done with the pitching staff. But again, if you get some seasons like we did in 2019 where you have guys perform over expectation, like for instance, back then that helped us a lot that a guy like Jake Odorizzi really stepped up and had a career year. Like that helps a lot when guys outperform expectations. When you do that and you pair it with a lineup that can score a lot of runs, then you're going to win a lot of games. So it just depends if we're going to really get lucky or not. I don't know if luck's the right word, but it's just guys having good seasons instead of playing below average. So I think that's really all we got to look for at this pitching staff, especially early on.
Yeah, I mean the starting pitching staff is not exactly my favorite, but there's at least some upside there to each one of these guys. Bailey Ober maybe not so much, and definitely not Dylan Bundy. But the Twins also got guys that are potentially waiting in the wings. Juan Duran was projected to be a starter, but obviously he's going to start in the bullpen. I'll be curious to see that how that goes over time, if he's just going to stay as a bullpen arm. Maybe if he becomes very good at that role, maybe that's just what he ends up being. Yeah. You got Winder as well that could potentially be in the bullpen mix to start off with, but he's also been a starting pitcher his minor league career. You got all these other starting pitching prospects: Jordan Balazovic, Simeon Woods Richardson, just to name a few. So we can dip into the prospects here too in a sec, but starting pitcher, some of these guys are just placeholders for a year. And then like you mentioned, the bullpen, you really want a solid back end. Although the Twins have been known to pull their starters after 5-6 innings, they don't let them go deep in the ball game. Having a Rogers that you can mostly trust back there. Tyler Duffy's been very good the last couple of years. And then if you can just get something out of like Johan Duran or Alcala or
like a Joe Smith or something,
or even Joe Smith, who we signed in as a veteran. If you can just get something out of some of these guys, you don't need all of them to be fantastic. So
yes,
yeah, like you said, it's just you're going to need some better production than expected, I guess, from some of these guys. But
Yes, exactly.
let's dip into the prospects here a little bit, Libert. I know you wanted to touch on some of these guys. Who are some guys that are sticking out to you? Obviously, we got some pretty highly rated prospects as it comes across the MLB, really. Do you envision any of these guys maybe making the team this year? Are you looking more so for pitching prospects this year rather than fielding prospects? What are kind of your thoughts on where the Twins stand with some of these guys?
Yeah, I think we got a pretty deep farm system, and a lot of it is made up of guys that could realistically come up and play major league games this season. So I think that's very noteworthy. I mean, it starts with the top three guys, really. When you go, Royce Lewis is going to start the season in AAA and be the shortstop there. Who knows if whether it be injury or whatever it might be, he could get his chance and earlier than people might think. And then you go down to the second spot, you got Austin Martin. He's going to start the season in AA, which kind of surprised me a little bit, but who knows? He could be another factor. And then you got Jose Miranda. I think that's probably the biggest one, the biggest prospect you're going to see the earliest, just because I think this guy's proven all he needs to prove in the minor leagues. So it's just a matter of time until he'll be up. And I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. Hopefully, I know Rocco made a comment that he's going to be contributing to this team in a big way very soon. So I think he'll probably be the first one up, realistically, out of the guys that don't make the opening day roster. And then as far as pitching goes, yeah, we got a bevy of them. I mean, our top 10 is made up of a whole bunch of them. From you got Josh Winder, and you already mentioned Balazovic and Simeon Woods Richardson. And then you even got guys like Drew Strotman. And I know you got I think I mentioned Winder, and then there's a Cantorino. I mean, there's a lot of guys that could call on, and really, it's kind of nice in a way that you'll be able to feel like at least one of them, or hopefully a couple of them, will be just having nice seasons in the minor leagues, that they're just obvious candidates to bring up and contribute right away. Inevitably, when I think one of our starters will probably fall apart or get hurt or something. So I think it's nice to have that depth there that you can rely on to at least hold you over until maybe like a trade deadline move or something. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of hope there. And I think there's a lot of guys that could be coming and going as far as our roster goes this year. So it's an exciting time, both for the established veterans, but as well as the prospects looking to make a name for themselves. I think there's a lot of talent on both ends of the spectrum for us, which that's really all I can ask for. And that's really what good teams have. I know, like for instance, the Dodgers. The Dodgers have been very good for how long now? It feels like every year they have this top prospect they always bring up that comes in and immediately contributes. Like I think the Twins could find that with a guy like Jose Miranda. So I'm pretty excited with what we have, and I think we have a lot of guys that could help us right now, not in 2023 or 2024 in the future and stuff. Like I think we have a lot of guys that could contribute right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited by pretty much every name you listed there. I mean, and what I think is most exciting, especially with these prospects, is as of right now, everybody's healthy. Like, Royce Lewis hadn't played baseball in like almost 3 years or something, like 2 full seasons he missed.
Yep.
Balazovic had different injuries. Joan Duran's had different injuries. So just having these guys healthy, at least to start the season and get a spring training in, like I think that's massive. Royce Lewis starting at AAA, I think is encouraging considering how much time he's missed. But then, like you mentioned, Austin Martin starting at AA is a little bit of a bummer, but that AAA team is so stacked that, there might not have been room for him necessarily. So, and they're going to kind of have to figure out too, like if they're both shortstops, obviously you're not going to need both of them. So they'll figure that out though, as time goes on, but yeah, super excited about the pitching prospects too. I don't know. They're in a good spot. I think they're in a spot where the major league team is pretty talented and has some really good pieces. But like you mentioned, if injuries happen, or if a guy like maybe Urshela doesn't produce, you can call upon like a Jose Miranda, or maybe Royce Lewis gets his shot at some point. So it's a really exciting time to be a Twins fan. I was pretty pessimistic about this team, but given some of the moves they made this offseason, all their prospects are back in camp and healthy again. Well, camp is over now, but as they're moving on to their different levels and teams and stuff like that. But I'm pumped for the way this team is being built right now.
Yeah, rightfully so. I think we're finally moving back in the right direction, it feels like. So I think that's always a reassuring thing when you feel like you agree with the moves the front office is making.
For sure. So let's get into the X factor here. Who is going to be your single biggest X factor this season? And we'll probably eliminate Buxton and Correa just because they're the obvious choices.
Yeah.
So, outside of that, who is your X factor, would you say?
Yeah, I totally agree. When you mentioned those two, it's like 2 potential MVP candidates, and especially Buxton. We've hammered this home for not only this offseason, but his entire career, really. It's just about him being on the field for the majority of the season, and his his play will be just fine, and it'll actually be exceptional, and to the point where he could be an MVP and borderline carry this team as long as the rest
Yeah.
of it's not a bunch of liabilities. So, like you said, that one's obvious, but I guess going beyond that, it's probably just finding guys on the pitching staff. Really, I would
Mhm.
say specifically the starting rotation, having guys you can count on to eat innings and not just be horrible. Really, I know that sounds kind of simple minded, but it's just having guys out there that can go out there and throw, let's say, 5-6 innings and give up, I don't know, 3 runs or something in the back end of your
Right.
rotation, and counting on not only that but the top of your rotation guys like Sonny Gray or Joe Ryan or something, be able to consistently give you good outings, night in, night out, quality starts. And I think that'll take us a long way because the bullpen, I think, is going to have a few good arms. But I think as you get deeper and deeper into it, like any team, you're going to have those weak arms that you're not going to want to see go out there. But
Yep.
I think the better our starting rotation is, the more it's going to help everything we do and help our cause for winning, I guess. So that's where I'd say probably it's just finding stability in the starting rotation for guys, whether it be these first 5 in a row out there, whoever might be prospects that we bring up, just find stability that it's not going to be liabilities there. Just throwing a bunch of innings for us. So how about you, Baylor? What's your X factor?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up Joe Ryan specifically, just seeing if
Okay.
he can maybe take just a massive step this year and maybe become an ace. Like not,
Yeah.
I don't expect him to be one of the best pitchers in the league, but if he could prove that he could be the ace of this team, I mean, they're giving him the ball on opening day. It's pretty big time right there. So
Yeah.
I was gonna bring him up, but I was also gonna bring up the back end of the bullpen. Like I think we're really gonna need good seasons out of Tyler Duffy, Taylor Rogers. I mean, we're going
Sure.
to need those guys to close down games for us because I could see us being in a lot of close games given that we don't have shutdown starting pitching. We have the offense that can hang with teams. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, we're going to be relying on those two quite a bit specifically, and how the rest
Sure.
of the bullpen kind of shapes out remains to be seen. Who's getting the 7th inning, stuff like that. But it's probably safe to assume you'll have Duffy and Rogers in the 8th and 9th interchanging every now and then.
Yeah.
So yeah, those two are going to be very important, I think, for this team this season, just because I see us in a lot of close games, and we'll get to our record prediction here in a second. But I think that, yeah, I think they're going to be very important because, we've seen it before. If you don't have a solid closer or, setup guy and you're blowing games late in the game, it's hard to recover from that. So
Yes.
I know Taylor Rogers certainly has gone through his tough stretches, and it seems like last year he was kind of starting to figure it out. But yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, the bullpen scares me a little bit, but not as much as the starting rotation. So I'm glad you brought that up because hopefully by the end of the season they're able to kind of solidify that, whether it's with prospects or whatever other avenues you can acquire starting arms.
Yeah, and it's not like for the majority of the season the pitching staff needs to be great by any means. I think it just
Yeah,
has to be serviceable. Like
exactly.
it doesn't even have to be top 10. Obviously, once you get to the playoffs stuff, then you got to crank it up a level and really get as good as you possibly can out of pitching, because that's ultimately what can win you a lot of playoff games. But for now, it's like just getting there in the first place. Like it doesn't have to be great. I think the lineup can do the heavy lifting. It's just being out there and not losing us games. Like you don't have to win us games, but not necessarily have to win us games, but just don't lose us games.
Absolutely. So let's jump into the record predictions, Alberto. What do you got for Twins record this year? Where are they finishing in the division? Yeah, what's their final record? Where are they finishing in the division? And what do you envision? Do you envision playoffs in their future?
Sure. Yeah, I gone back and forth on this a little bit as far as swaying between 80 wins to 85, and I think I'm selling on the number 84, just to tick below what I think is like the peak as far as preseason predictions goes for this team. I know they could way outperform this because, like in 2019, they were projected to win 78 games or something, and then they end up
Mm-hmm.
winning over 100. So baseball is kind of a hard thing to really envision 6 months from now, like
Yeah.
where this team's going to be at. But I'd say 84, I feel good about. I think that's going to get us second in the division over the Guardians, the Royals, and the Tigers. I think the White Sox are still the cream of the crop and going to win the division, but I think we're going to finish second. And I think we'll be pushing for probably that last wild card spot, because I think the AL East is also going to be pretty deep, from the Rays to the Blue Jays, the Yankees, the Red Sox. I think all those teams are going to be very good, as well as the Astros will still be a solid squad out in the West, and they'll probably still win their division. And then you got
Yeah.
the Mariners, who I think will be better than they've been in a long time. I know that last year they're already kind of pushing for a playoff spot, but they haven't made it in 20 years, and I feel like they probably do. So, yeah, I still think we're going to scratch in with that last wild card spot it kind of feels like we're having a conversation like we have with the Vikings, where it's like second
Yeah, I
in the
know.
division, and then we're scratching the playoffs with this like slightly above average record. But that's
Mhm.
just the reality situation right now. So I'm gonna say 84 wins, second in the division, and the last wild card spot. What are you thinking, Bailey?
Yeah, I was right around that 84 number with you as well. I'm gonna go 85 and 77.
Okay.
I know that's what I was telling you and Jackson the other day, but
Hmm.
I can see it. I mean, last year they, how many games did they win last year? It's like 70,
I think it was 73.
73. So
Yeah.
that'd be a 12 win improvement. Like I could see that. You get bring in a player like Carlos Correa. Um, obviously you've made some other moves this offseason as well to, bolster your lineup. I think the lineup's better than it was last year.
Hmm.
Um, although last year we dealt with injuries, and
Yes.
I still think it'd be awesome to have Nelson Cruz here, but obviously that's
Oh
far
yeah.
fetched now that the NL's got a DH and everything too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think 85 and 77. I'm with you though. Second in the division, ahead of the Guardians, Royals, and Tigers. White Sox will still win the division. They might be the best team in the AL this year. Um,
Maybe.
it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that then you got the AL East with with the Yankees, Red Sox, the Blue Jays. I think could be pretty dang good too.
Yes.
Um, Tampa Bay is always competing too. I guess I'm waiting for them to fall off though. I'm waiting for them to just have a down year. But yeah, I think it's gonna be tough. They'll be competing for one of those wild card spots, and whether or not they get in, I guess I don't know. I'm hoping they do because I want to find a way to keep Carlos Correa around here, and I feel like you got
Yeah.
to make the playoffs to convince him to stay for more than one season.
I know, right?
So that'll be a big part of it, I guess. But I think you and I obviously we have him in the same ballpark, so it'll be interesting. But do you have any other final thoughts here before we take off? I guess maybe what you're most looking forward to watching this season.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of storylines going on, especially early in the season, as far as how the pitching staff gets off the ground right away from the starting rotation to the bullpen, or how all these new acquisitions we have in the lineup look like. From Correa, obviously that's the big one, but then even guys like Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez. I think there's a lot to be determined here. I think there's a fairly high ceiling. Like I think there is a reality out there where they win 90 games. If
Hmm.
I'm being honest, if guys like we said overperform expectation and you get better seasons out of the pitchers than you would expected, then I think we could win upwards of 90 games. But I could also see vice versa, having a floor where we maybe not even quite get to 80 wins, where it's a little bit less than that, where we just
Yep.
kind of end up as like a kind of mediocre team that wins 79 or something like that. So uh, I would say if Correa and Buxton are healthy, and I'll just keep hammering this thing home, and they play a lot of games, they're going to be the MVP conversation. I think they'll take us a long ways, but it's just I know what scares me about that is teams like the Angels, for instance, are built on having two of the best players in baseball, Trout and Otani, but it's like the rest of the team just doesn't get it done, so then they don't, and they hover around 500, and that's just
Right.
that's kind of painful when you have like some of the best players in the game, but it doesn't make enough of a difference for you to get in the playoffs and make some noise. So I think it's just the volatility of baseball is just so hard to put a finger on. It's just kind of take the season one step at a time, one day at a time, 1 month at a time, and see where we're at. Hopefully, not really bottoming out again after the
Hmm.
month of April like we did last year.
Yeah, I think they just got to get off to a good start. I think, and like you said, maybe just hover around 500 for a little while, find your footing. But yeah, just don't go in the tank right away because then it's like last year. It's like, well, you get into May and they're like, no, they're still a playoff team. Like, Twins fans are in denial. They're still a playoff team. You're getting into June, they're still struggling. No, they're still a playoff team. And it's like, no, they're not. Like they're just bad. So then they're trading guys left and right. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, just get off to a decent start this year. Don't dig yourself a massive hole right off the bat and just go from there. But I'm excited to
Yes.
see Byron Buxton. He's a fantastic player to watch. And I really hope he stays healthy for once for a full season. He's gotten smarter. He's playing in the field smarter. Hitting, he's finally figured out hitting. Like he's a very good hitter. Just watching his approach at the plate.
Yes.
So I'm very excited to watch him.
And yeah, and let's hope we can get to the playoffs, and maybe Korea can be the one that puts us over the top as far as finally
Yeah,
breaking
true.
that postseason losing streak, because he's one of the clutchest players I've ever seen, probably the clutchest player, and I think he'd be a huge part in having a good playoff team actually for once in 30 years. So
Right.
I'd be I'd be really excited about that. If we can get there, I think we could actually break that losing streak.
That's a really good point. Yeah, he's going to be a difference maker come playoff time if we can get there. So, yeah, that's a massive X factor for the playoffs too. But that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I mentioned earlier, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Hit the like button on this video. Help us reach other Minnesota Twins and Major League Baseball fans. Give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram, and leave your comments below. What are you expecting from the Twins this season? Who's your X factor? What do you think of the lineup and the pitching staff? Give us all your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, thanks for watching.